I love you, Mary.
Someone shared this in my Discord as well. It's going to be something very different, don't worry. This potholer54 channel, I think, seems to talk about like science and stuff. Yeah. Correct false scientific information on the internet. And they have made a video called How Many Genders Are There, Daddy? I don't know what daddy means in this. What the science says. Let's have a look.
How many genders are there? I get this question a lot because apparently I'm pro-science, which means I guess a lot of people are anti-science, and the question is frequently put to other posters on my channel. For anyone in the rest of the world who may be wondering what all the fuss is about, this has become a huge deal in the United States.
Are you dressed up? Are you a man? Are you a man pretending to be a woman?
I'm not pretending to be anything. I'm just dressed.
What do you think about my son, who might think that he can put on makeup and put on fancy clothing and high heels and have his penis cut off?
I don't know the context of this. So maybe it's being cut up. It doesn't look amazing. Like, this isn't really the way of dealing with something. I mean, this seems to be a place where anyone can go. This is a bit ridiculous, but I don't have the full context.
And take estrogen so he can grow fake boobs like those.
Because, like, the kid seeing a trans person isn't going to automatically think, wow, maybe I can take estrogen and be like them.
Yeah, this is so degrading.
Yeah, what if her son has his penis cut off? Ever thought about that? And why is a man dressed as a woman?
Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing you might want to worry about if you're being taught about, like, weird gender identities in schools. But just a person, like, is this a hotel lobby? Like, come on, bro. You need to calm down a bit. It's not that bad. Trans people are, in fact, allowed to go out in public.
And being berated by a woman dressed as a man. Obviously, this video is going to delve into the murky world of, well, sex. So I'll have to be careful I don't stray into any double entendre, which would sully this serious scientific look at the issue.
Do you know, I haven't done this since I was in the army. At a camp...
Could be a skit, yeah. I mean, if this is a parody, then that's certainly how it's coming off. But you never know anymore, that's the thing. So much stuff out there. It's like Josh Saiter. I couldn't tell it was a parody because there's just so many people that do the exact same thing as Josh Saiter, but sometimes even more egregious. Oh, hi Shadow to Think. Hi LKD also.
Concert.
I'll try hard not to slip one in. Oh!
I mean, if a man's in a dress, you can just leave them alone. You don't have to point and laugh at them. But hey, that's me. That's me. I don't actually really care what people are wearing. It's more about what they do and what they say.
I've been collecting these posts for a while with the idea of making a video to clear up the confusion. Because, of course, gender has nothing to do with science. It's a linguistic and social term. But why?
Hey, that's a kind of good point. Like, we talk about the science and stuff. Well, the science, we're really talking about sex. And that kind of fits in with how I understand gender, which is that it's the social and cultural aspects of sex.
I love you, Mary.
Oh, thank you so much, Siren Song. How kind of you. Thank you so much. Hi, Owen. I hope you're good. Hi, Ink Searcher. So yeah, to me, gender isn't really a scientific concept, which begs the question as to why we treat it as one. You know what I mean? This potholer video is bizarre. Seems like he was aiming for central, moderate, progressive, supporting trans. He picked off all sides. I mean, someone picking off all sides sounds like something I'd get down with, but I need to actually watch the video, to be fair. Also, hi, Bacon Sani Geddon. I can't think of a name. I thought transgender was a science according to Dr. Pride. It's Professor Pride. Listen, he's not a doctor. He calls himself a researcher or something. Like, whatever that means, I have no idea. The guy is nuts. The stuff that he says on his channel is like pure fucking pseudoscience bullshit. They've been selling gender as a scientific concept for years. Good for him to admit that's not. Yeah, I agree. Like, when we start saying the science supports transgender, it's like, well, what do you even mean by that?
While I was nearly finished with the video, news came in of this executive order from the White House, so I've just got time to include it. It's pretty clear that the executive order and all these posts are confusing gender with sex, which is a scientific term.
Well, the problem is, to lots of people, when you say gender, they mean sex, and those terms are to an extent used interchangeably. I think it's better to have two different terms that mean two different things, personally, because there should be some word for, you know, the social aspects of sex and like the stereotypes that are more attached to one sex or another, like things that are like culturally tied to one or the other, like having long hair being stereotypically feminine, for example.
Now, whether there are more than two sexes, we'll come to that in a minute.
My answer to that is there are not. Like, you want to have a null sex category for people who are intersex to the point where you literally cannot tell, and there is no way of telling whatsoever. You can do. But those people, if that's the case, they're not producing any gametes. They have no reproductive function, just like me. And sex is about your reproductive function, or what should be your reproductive function. Because you're going to get people who have all the equipment there, but there's something wrong with it, which is my counter to when people say, oh, well, what about infertile people? Infertile people still count, you know what I mean? It goes a bit deeper than that. And what I tend to find is the people that say that kind of stuff, they don't really ever talk to anyone they disagree with. So they never really get off the first part of the argument. Because it's always just so checkmate, and that's not really how this works, you know?
Not surprisingly, when I check my science dictionary, the word gender isn't in there. It's not in my biology dictionary either. So where did the word...
Yeah, listen, so far this is based. Maybe it'll go off a cliff somewhere, but this part of it is good. I'm very down with this.
...gender come from, and what does it mean? It derives from the Latin word genus, meaning a type. In Old French, that was rendered as genre, which passed into Old English as gender after the Norman conquest. It came to mean a type or a sort. Shakespeare used the word twice, each time with that meaning. But it was most commonly used to describe different types of nouns. Some European languages had three genders, like...
Yeah, because the thing is, like, gendered language doesn't have a sex, yet you get languages that are gendered. So to just say that gender only means sex is not a good answer either, in my opinion.
German and Russian, others like French, Italian and Spanish had too. There was no sexual connection with most of these gender assignments. After all, in French, the noun masculinity is feminine and a vagina is masculine. But because masculine and feminine were attached to grammatical types or genders, the word gender became associated with male and female. These days, the term gender is mostly used as an adjective to describe men who are attracted to women but like to dress as women, and women who are attracted to men but like to dress as men, and men who are attracted to men and like to dress as women, and you get the picture. By the way, if you think all that's a bad influence on kids, you're going to love the British tradition of Christmas pantomime.
Hello, everybody!
I mean, it's a far cry from thinking you can be the other sex, I'll say that much. Like, this is, like, obvious and silly, you know what I mean? If you're trans, you're probably not trying to invoke anything like this. I mean, hey, probably some are, but most of us not so much. Not everyone is Lily Tino.
Hey!
Yeah, this is how British children have celebrated the birth of baby Jesus since the Victorian era, cheering on a hero known as the principal boy, who's a woman playing a man, with comic characters being men dressed as women. And of course, the principal...
The ambiguity needs to be cleared up. Having a word for sex-based gender is fine. When it's the same word as independent, born in the wrong body stuff, it's just a mess. Yeah, it would help immensely if people started speaking from the same page about gender. Like, it's become an incredibly confusing concept because everyone has decided it means about 25 different things. And in that sense, maybe there are loads of different kinds of genders because the word means so many different things. So it means sex, yet it also means stereotypes, yet it also means how you feel on the inside, which is innate apparently. Like, it's all a little bit ridiculous.
boy, played by a woman, has to have a romantic relationship with the principal girl, played by a woman. Now, put like that, I suppose it all does sound a bit eccentric. But this is a Christmas tradition for children that goes back over 100 years, and even Princess Elizabeth played the role of principal boy, making her the only cross-dressing female ever to become a queen. Oh, no, she wasn't. Oh, yes, you're right. French Queen Marie Antoinette was also a cross-dresser. So why do people think this has anything to do with science? Again, because people are confusing gender with sex. Now, sex is science, so if you want to know how many sexes there are, well, according to biology, there are
Lily Tino had an FFS. Oh my god, Queen. I'm joking.
two, male and female. But surely sex is science, so if you want to know how many sexes there are, well, according to biology, there are two.
True. Listen, you can go on about infertile people if you want. Infertile people still have one of two designs here. You can talk about intersex or DSDs, which is a much better way of putting it. Those are largely genetic mistakes and accidents that result in your sexual development going wrong, but you still follow a certain pathway and you still have some version of one gonad over the other. I don't think there's anyone that has a full version of both gonads, meaning that people who are hermaphroditic still have a dominant gonad. And there really isn't enough there to say that there's a third sex. Like, there's one and two sexes that are responsible for creating babies. And then what? Some magical third sex that doesn't really do anything. And what's it for? Who fucking knows? It doesn't really make any sense to think of it that way. It doesn't make any sense to think of it as a spectrum either, because someone is not 5% male and 95% female, for example. You'd have to, like, work out exactly how much of one and the other someone is, and it doesn't make sense to do that. There's still two gametes, there's still two types of gonads, and that's the whole point. That's the function of it, which is reproduction.
Male and female. But surely I must believe there are more than two. After all, here's a guy who's done his own research. Well, turns out you can't always trust what people who take pride in doing their own research tell you, especially when it comes to things I said or think or believe. If we follow the science, which this poster hasn't, then according to human biology, males are defined as producers of small sex cells, while females are defined as producers of large sex cells. The problem with the scientific definition is that some men can't produce sperm and some women can't produce eggs.
Well, they still have the stuff that should be allowing them to, and there's something wrong with it. Like, you wouldn't cut a guy's penis off and declare that he's not a man anymore, you know what I mean?
So, to make the definition more robust, there are other characteristics that distinguish the sexes. Women generally have two X chromosomes and a uterus. Men generally have one X and one Y chromosome and a penis and testes. Hang on, never mind what YouTube says, I've got a picture of that here. Sorry. That's the best I can do, but it's in there somewhere. If someone has a combination of all these characteristics...
I don't even want to know how the fuck he got hold of this. What search term he put in to get a hold of it. Like, what is... Anyway, let's move swiftly on.
...which are based on what we can see, then he or she can fairly be described as biologically male or female. Before modern technology came along, doctors traditionally assigned the sex of the baby according to the visible genitalia. Any baby born with a penis was a male, and a baby born without one was designated a female. When ultrasound came along, it did the same thing. That designation is what goes on the birth certificate.
Is that actually him?
And for hundreds of years, that's how conservative and religious groups have preferred it. You go with the sex that's on your birth certificate, and you can't change it.
It's a birth certificate, and it's binary. You can only be male or female.
Yeah. Now, if the world had been created by a loving God who...
Yeah, I mean, birth certificate isn't a good argument any more than my legal gender is this, is like a belly, is like a good argument. Like, you're not talking about biology at that point. You're not talking about sex. You're talking about what someone's thing has been recorded as, or what other people have decided you are based on factors, you know.
Who intelligently designed everything would all fit.
Back in Shakespeare plays, days and plays were performed, didn't men play the female roles? Yeah, I'm not sure if women were allowed to act in plays, to be honest.
Easily into one of these two categories. Unfortunately, the reproductive system hasn't been intelligently designed. It's a messy chemical process. Sometimes babies have a barely visible micropenis and a small opening underneath that looks like a vagina. Sometimes female labia look more like a male scrotum.
Yeah, so here is where things like assigned sex at birth actually make sense. But we're trying to say that our sex was assigned when we're very obviously one or the other, which doesn't make any sense.
And vice versa. So,
I mean, if you come out of the womb with like a full penis and testicles, how would you like does anyone exist that has that but is yet still female? Like, is there any condition where it looks like you have a full penis and testicles, yet you don't? I'm not sure, because humans aren't hyenas, you know?
So a baby girl can be mistaken for a boy and a boy for a girl. Sometimes a baby can have both a uterus and testicles. Sorry, again, YouTube won't let me show you photos. Often these anatomical traits are in conflict with the presence or absence of a Y chromosome, so it's entirely possible for a baby to be born legally a female and yet turn out to be biologically male because she has a Y chromosome. Even the chromosomes themselves are often not distinct. Thousands of babies are born every year with an extra X chromosome, which still makes them anatomically male, but with a reduction of what are regarded as male characteristics, like a low sperm count and low levels of testosterone. More rare is a condition with 3 or 4 chromosomes, causing even fewer male characteristics, and breast enlargement. Some babies are born with 2 Y chromosomes, and so on. So yes, there are only 2 sexes, male and female, but it's analog, not digital. Sex is more like an artist's palette, where the colours...
Okay, I disagree with this. I don't think you can say it's a spectrum just because you get people that through genetic accidents are resembling more one than the other. Like, they still fit a certain role. And if they can still reproduce as one of the 2 sexes, then how can they be a mixture of both? You know what I mean? So I don't think this really makes much sense to say.
Sometimes get mixed as they're applied to the canvas. So for that nebulous area between male and female, biology uses the term intersex. Now that's...
Yeah, see, the problem with intersex is it's become like an identity thing, and identity has got nothing to do with science or biology. Identity is like a conscious thing. You can choose your own identity, and that's the point for a lot of people. So that's why people are saying DSD a lot more now, because you get plenty of like differences in sexual development that don't actually make your sex at all ambiguous. Like things that he's mentioned, like Klinefelter, for example.
It's not a third sex, it simply defines the status of people who are biologically in between male and female.
And is it right to say in between if sex is primarily about your biological, like, reproduction role? Then it has to be 2 kind of discrete categories, no?
So if you're confident that you're an authority on what classifies men and women based on a political or religious position, here's a pop-up quiz question. If a newborn baby is determined to be female and has female written on the birth certificate, but later turns out to have XY chromosomes, which one determines the sex?
So XY female. Leads to differentiation of gonads into testicular tissue. If they have testicles, then they're male.
Turns out to have XY chromosomes, which one determines the sex?
Yeah, it's about the gonads, ultimately.
If only there was a scientific way to differentiate between...
Like, here's the thing, you're always going to get the odd person that is like misassigned sex at birth. That's just going to happen. Like, that's how it is. That's like our understanding only being so much, because a lot of things that aren't meant to happen. And that does make it more difficult and confusing. But then there are places where it does matter. You know what I mean? You've got people with certain DSDs that enter into female sports and might be a lot bigger and stronger than other people in their category, for example, like as we've seen. So there are places where it does matter. In general, Does it matter for 100% which sex you are or which sex you're perceived to be? Not always, you know? It's more like specific things that you have to worry about, and not, in general, making sure that everyone you see is something you can categorize neatly, which, I mean, we kind of do, I guess, but only because that's what exists. That's what everyone sees. And like we get all these like bizarre, like, oh, people have to like categorize people into two things. Well, no, we see what we see, like, ultimately. It's not really like that kind of Julia Serrano shit is kind of taking it to an extreme, in my opinion.
Men and women, and we're very open to listening if someone could come up with a way, and all of this was already
like
known,
a chromosome test,
documented.
Like a chromosome test.
So according to Sky News Australia, a Murdoch network that's our version of Fox News, sex is determined solely by chromosomes. Okay, question number 2 then. Should a woman be allowed to change the sex she was born with and legally become a man if it turns out she has the XY chromosome?
Well, like, if they have sufficient, like, reason to show that they're born the wrong sex or recorded as the wrong sex, then I guess so, yeah. But why does that mean that ordinary people that do not have a DSD, why does that mean that they should be able to? Like, it's almost like, because certain people have an issue. He looked up Alec Gunter naked. Alec Gunter is probably, like, shredded, to be fair. He looks like he works out and shit. But no, like, yeah, the thing is, just because this is appropriate for people that have DSDs, it's a bit weird for a bunch of people to start raising their hands and be like, well, that's not fair. I want to be able to do that. Well, it's like, well, they've got something wrong with them. That quality of life is quite possibly diminished because of this thing that they have in many different ways. And you want to take that on, you know what I mean? This isn't 99% of people. Yep, very true.
Obviously, Sky News would be in favour of that. Right?
It's a birth certificate, and it's binary. You can only be male or female.
Not so straightforward, is it? Question 3. There was a woman in Melbourne.
It's not straightforward, but it matters in certain, like, circumstances. And there are ways of determining in, like, I don't know, it must be infinitesimal amount of people that there is absolutely no way of determining what sex they are for pretty much 100%. Which means that we've decided that something is a spectrum or not a binary based on an extremely small amount of people. Bearing in mind most people with DSDs, it's still fairly clear what sex they are. And we know a lot about these conditions. We know a lot about what causes them and where they should have been going if not for an issue. You know what I mean?
Melbourne, who had 2 completely different sets of chromosomes. Some cells in her body
2 sets, so that's mosaicism.
Comprised XX chromosomes, others were XY. Doctors postulated this was caused when twin eggs in her mother's uterus, one male, one female, fused together. So the question is, should she be classified as a man or a woman?
Let me just listen. I don't know if he's explaining stuff super well. I mean, this is an example of a mosaic condition. Someone, who was it? I think it was in Kate Montgomery's like comment section. Someone was like, I was saying, well, there's 2 different kinds of gametes, which is why I believe that sex is binary. To boil it down like a huge amount. And this person's like, well, I've got mosaicism and I was made from 4 gametes. And I was like, well, you're made from 2 eggs and 2 sperm. What I'm saying is there's 2 different kinds, not that you're made of 2 gametes. I don't know if people can't read sometimes, or like they think that kind of thing isn't own. It's bizarre. Fairly rare, so this is just this kind of mosaicism. I don't know how many there actually are, to be clear. Like signs and symptoms. So characteristics are highly variable. I mean, ultimately, like ultimately it comes down to like the gametes, and ultimately this comes to this kind of shit isn't supposed to happen in the first place. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, listen, you're probably going to get the very rare people that don't neatly fit either, and that's fine, but that doesn't make it not a binary. because it's about the gonads, it's about the gametes, ultimately. And if any one of these people has one particular dominant gonad, bearing in mind no one has both that work completely, then that's kind of your answer, really, in my opinion.
If only there was a scientific way to differentiate between men and women.
Like a chromosome test!
And now you see the problem. The science part is easy because science just gives us the facts. The difficult decisions about pigeonholing sexes, issuing passports and deciding on bathroom signs has to be argued over by politicians, lawyers and cable TV pundits with shiny teeth. So that's much harder. Which brings us...
Well, I mean, that's a cost of trans issues becoming extremely hot in the media. Like we've got issues that are very high visibility but affect very few people. But, you know, that's kind of the cost of visibility. That's kind of the cost of this weird new thing coming up that people are having to like change the way they think and change the way they speak over. Like that's kind of just how it is, unfortunately. And yeah, politicians have to get involved sometimes because the idea of a male person taking on complete female roles in every single way, that's gonna raise a lot of issues that you're not just gonna think of like off the bat, you know what I mean? It's not until these people start existing and start being known to other people that we really have to start thinking about this. And actually there are kind of issues in certain ways here. I want to see the TRA response to this. Basically define trans women as men dressing as women. I wonder if he's been cancelled yet. Serves him right. Why does it serve him right? You pro-cancellation? I am not.
Should she be classified as a man or a woman?
Listen, I don't begrudge anyone trying to like clear things up. No one's gonna get it 100%. And there's, you know, probably issues with the kind of shit that I'm saying because I'm very much a layman and I accept that, you know what I mean? I'm just going on what I can surmise, but truthfully, we're talking about such a tiny amount of people. And it's more about the kind of the linguistic shit about whether something's a spectrum or not, which really has nothing to do with the actual science itself.
If only there was a scientific way to differentiate between men and women.
Like a chromosome test!
Yeah, because 99 point whatever % of the time, this is true, right? That's the other thing. And like we talk about this shit, oh, it's such a small amount of people when it's like trans sports or something. Oh, we shouldn't worry about trans sports because it's so few like trans athletes that are competing. But then when it's something like this, where it's like, oh, well, there's so few people that seem to skirt the binary, that seem to fly in the face of it, suddenly these people are incredibly important. So it's like we pick and choose which minorities are important and which ones should be ignored, which is strange in my opinion. It comes off hypocritical.
And now you see the problem. The science part is easy because science just...
Is he trying to court TRAs? How do you know? Like, we're kind of inferring intent, are we not? Like, I don't know. I'm not down with that on either side, personally.
Just gives us the facts. The difficult decisions about pigeonholing sexes, issuing passports and deciding on bathroom signs has to be argued over by politicians, lawyers and cable TV pundits with shiny teeth. So that's much harder. Which brings us back to this new executive order. I wrote all that before it was issued, so the first thing I did was to look and see how it defined a man and a woman. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell. Male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cell.
Listen, Bacon Sani Geddon, if he starts saying now that everyone is born female, I will take back everything I've said in arguing with you. Is that fair?
It's pretty obvious the order was written by a politician and not a
Well, yeah, it's an executive order. We knew that without any of that shit.
biologist.
And like, that's not necessarily a problem because they have to, they're talking about how it interfaces with everyone's daily lives. They're not doing it from the perspective of what's the most autistically accurate description of something possible, you know what I mean?
Because as any first-year biologist or medical student would have pointed out, it's impossible to know what the sex of a fetus is at conception. For the first 5
at conception. Well, yeah, true. But then, well, the thing is, at conception it is, but then it becomes clear pretty quickly. So like, yeah, if you're trying to scan your child at conception to work out what exactly it is, you're not going to get anywhere with that. But it becomes clear as time goes on. Like, it's kind of talking about potential to an extent, right? An executive order isn't law, so I don't know why the TERFs are happy. Well, I mean, it's going to have a lot of knock-on effects. It's going to make certain things function a lot differently that is probably way more in line with what they want. They're not down with child transition, so those executive orders they're going to be down with, because that is already seemingly reducing a lot of that shit. So yeah, I don't know. I do understand why they're happy. Obviously, anything comes with the risk that it'll just get undone with the next government, but we'll have to see. I mean, geez.
5 weeks, a fetus has no sex. After that, a series of chemical processes sends the fetus in a certain direction. It's what non-scientists could call a biological truth. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be interested to know how a court is going to determine someone's sex by trying to figure out whether he or she was male or female at conception.
Well, yeah, but they're not going to look at conception. They'll look at however many weeks. I don't know. This is a bit of a non-point, if I'm honest. Like, yeah, you can't tell at conception, but you'll know at a certain point that that's what they were at conception. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Not only that, as I pointed out, a lot of men have genetic conditions that mean they can't produce sperm, and a lot of women can't produce eggs.
Well, yeah, but what do they have? What are their gonads, irrespective of whether they work or not? The vast majority of infertile people still have the same equipment. It's just not working for one reason or another. Like, you could still look at it and say, well, that's definitely a penis. You've definitely gone through, like, male puberty or whatever. And that's the thing. There's kind of an order of preference, I guess. Like, if someone produces one of these gametes, that's the most obvious thing. But if they don't produce those gametes, then you go down to, like, the gonads, what gonads they have, for example. So to me, or at least this is how I think it should be anyway, there should be, like, an order of preference. And what people, I think, try and do is put things like, you know, breasts, facial hair, stuff like that on a similar level. You know, we're calling them secondary sex characteristics. Even calling them sex characteristics is kind of putting them on that level to an extent. As things like gametes, which you can't do, because a man can get breasts just by getting fat. A woman can have certain conditions that give her facial hair, but she's still a woman.
So how do they get classified? Okay, here's my last question. Let's say someone was born a male.
Yeah, like, how do they get classified? It's fairly obvious. I think, I don't know. I expect a bit better than...
And has male...
Than intersex. Excuse me. I expect a bit better than getting stalled at, like, infertile people. You can very clearly tell what most infertile people are, because you can very clearly tell what most people are, unless they've changed a bunch of stuff about themselves, in which case, well, you know, naturally, how are they born? What biological processes would they have been following had they not changed stuff? Or have they already followed?
On his birth certificate and has a penis and sperm and the Y chromosome, then should he be allowed to biologically change his sex?
Well, you can't biologically change your sex. It doesn't matter if you're allowed to or not.
Has male on his birth certificate, and a lot of women can't produce eggs. So how do they get classified? Okay, here's my last question. Let's say someone was born a male and has male on his birth certificate and has a penis and sperm and the Y chromosome, then should he be allowed to biologically change his sex?
Yeah, you can't. You can't change your sex. Like, it doesn't matter if you're allowed to or not. Like, every cell in your body is still what it is, ultimately.
Of course, that's a trick question. There's no medical procedure that can biologically change your sex.
There you go.
As it's currently defined. Men who
there you go.
Fit these categories, which is what makes them men.
Like, what basically we seem to be doing, us non-DSD havers, because I'm not aware that I have any kind of DSD. What we're doing is seeing that intersex people are ambiguous and might have to change what is recorded as their sex. And we're putting our hand up and saying, hey, that's not fair. I want to be able to do that. But, you know, we're appropriating the struggle of people that, because of their DSD, probably have like a lower quality of life, probably have a much more confusing time because the processes that their body is following are messed up to begin with and are not necessarily going to be what they expect, because they might have testicles that are like somewhat functioning and will produce some amount of testosterone. And then they think they're female, but they're going through a bunch of stuff that would typically be what a male does, because they might actually be male themselves. That's what it seems like the trans side of the argument is doing. And to be fair, I guess you could say that that's what I've done. You know, I'm trans myself.
Can't produce eggs or have female reproductive organs or XX chromosomes through surgery or any other means that we know of. But when it comes to how people feel, well, that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel how you want. That will never actually change your sex, ultimately. And when it comes to gender, really what you can do is change a bunch of like your gendered characteristics. Like, let's say facial hair is a gendered characteristic because it's way more associated with males than it is females, even if females can have it, which is why I'm saying gendered, not sexed. You can have like your facial hair like lasered off or something. That hasn't changed your sex at all. But you can change your gendered, you know, you can change your gendered characteristics so that people gender you a certain way. Being gendered being how people perceive you based on your observable characteristics, which is not the same as sex at all.
Now, I'm not talking about men who fake a gender choice in order to get into women.
Which happens, by the way. And it's not just men faking it, it's people use this shit as a shield. You get people like Isla Bryson or that Lexi Secker who did crimes as a male and then decide that they're trans female now. Lexi Secker in particular did this after the crime had occurred. Went on YouTube, started making a bunch of like trans slop shitty fucking content, seemingly trying to get herself in or get himself in with a certain crowd. Like using trans as a shield. And it didn't fucking work because he's in jail now, so fuck that guy. But people will do that kind of thing. We tend to bury our heads in the sand and be like, oh, you shouldn't talk about that. Those are going to make us look bad. Well, it's like, well, playing defense for those people, allowing them to use trans as a shield is making us look bad. Like way worse than pointing it out.
Women's prisons or women's changing rooms. In fact, a lot of men don't even bother with the gender pretense. They walk into women's changing rooms anyway.
Yep, they do. But the thing is, if you're to say that people can identify into like a woman's bathroom or a man's bathroom, and a guy goes in there with the intent of doing something bad, someone catches him before he can do anything bad, he can have the easy out of, oh, well, I identify as this. I'm extremely early in my transition, but I identify as this. And then, you know, they're free to go and try it again somewhere else, potentially. So it's kind of an issue still.
And get away with it. But there are also people who are biologically male or female and genuinely do feel trapped in the wrong sex. Otherwise, why spend a lot of money on surgery and hormones?
Oh, trust me. There's lots of reasons why people will do this kind of thing. There's lots of ways in which you can convince yourself that this is right for you and it's not. Like just saying, oh, well, why would they do it otherwise? Well, for community, for attention, to assuage their issues with something else that they're like projecting onto their sex. Ultimately, there are lots of different reasons. Hi, Mikhail Dasso, be good.
And risk public opprobrium.
Yeah, because shit like this, like, you're almost allowing people to use this shit as a shield, in a way. By saying, oh, well, why would they do it otherwise? Well, lots of reasons. You don't really know. And if you ask someone, they're not necessarily going to tell you the truth, because people are Machiavellian, people lie. And it's weird how sometimes we just pretend that that's not a thing. Like, maybe I'm overly cynical. Maybe I am not trusting enough of other people. But I just do not I don't buy what people say off the bat. You know what I mean? And if you're going to be a male that says I'm a woman, like, well, I don't see that. I'm sorry. You're quite clearly a man. Yeah, I don't know.
This has to do with another difference between men and women, which is brain structure. If we're dealing with the ends of the...
Yeah, there is little evidence for the brain structure stuff. Like, brains are largely non-dimorphic, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I understand. There's certain differences, but you can observe male brains that have typical female patterns. You can observe female brains that have typically male patterns. There's some evidence that there are some differences. There is a lot of evidence that there really isn't much of a difference. It's kind of a shaky ground that you're on here.
The spectrum, the male brain is wired differently to the female brain. This was known long before MRI came along. It was discovered through a research
Like, I don't even know what this is. Bors et al. 2001.
process called
Male brains are bigger. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons they're different is because of cranium size. It grows into the skull that it is in. But that's not, that only means so much, because someone with a bigger brain isn't necessarily more intelligent.
marriage. But MRI confirmed it. Brain scans also show that transgender people who are biologically men may have more of what we might call a female brain structure.
I don't know how you would show this. Like, a big problem with these kind of things is that they tend to measure people who have already started on hormones. The other problem is often, like, these differences in the brain, they more apply to like homosexuals. Like, you'll get more feminized men who tend to be attracted to other men that will have more of a female looking brain, you know what I mean? What was this? Have I looked at this before? I swear this is sounds familiar. Because there's other studies that show that kind of control for attraction, like male or female attracted people, and you see differences with them as well. It's kind of it's extremely dicey. This is.
It's just that with the current state of technology, it's impossible to classify these brain types as...
I mean, you have to think based on this. Why is it that no one gets their brain scanned when they're going for like trans treatment? No one does. They don't scan your brain to try and tell if you're trans or not.
one of the indicators of biological sex. So they stay in the realm of psychology and sociology under the label of gender rather than sex. Maybe one day science will discover a genetic or neurological reason for the transgender brain type.
Yeah, the thing is, even if they do, it will get rejected anyway, because people want to regard it as a identity and nothing else. The problem you will have is that people want to transition, irrespective of if they have gender dysphoria, irrespective if they meet your or anyone else's definition for what trans is. They still want to transition anyway and see that as like their birthright. You know what I mean?
Just as we'll discover why some people like listening to Debussy rather than Drake, or prefer gardening to coin collecting. In the meantime, science can't...
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, that kind of shit isn't really... There's so many variations as it is. Why don't they do brain scans before sex reassignment surgery? I have no idea. I guess, I mean, a brain scan is probably quite expensive to do, is one counter. And then the other thing is, like, if it's post-HRT, if they've already started HRT, then it might well be that that HRT has affected the brain, meaning you start taking estrogen, and then your brain starts looking more like a female brain. Well, it's, you know, you've had estrogen in your system for however long. Like, is that surprising? But that's artificial. That isn't actually your brain, you know what I mean?
give you the answer to that question, and it certainly can't tell you who should be allowed into bathrooms or sporting events or women's locker rooms, because that's all a matter of opinion. I'm to discover why some people like listening to Debussy rather than Drake, or prefer gardening to coin collecting. In the meantime, science can't give
Yeah, it's like he's pitching a tent, right? Jesus Christ. Which I guess is apt.
you the answer to that question, and it certainly can't tell you who should be allowed into bathrooms or sporting events.
Well, I mean, sporting events being a matter of opinion, the problem is everything we know about sexual dimorphism leans to the idea that men are just better at most sports. You can see that in results and stuff like that. You can see that in Serena and Venus Williams playing back to back against like the 200 seed tennis player, male, you know what I mean? And both losing. Or like all those different, like, is it the US women's football team? Is it US women's football team that have like played like college teams, like 15-year-olds and stuff, like boys and stuff, and got destroyed? Stuff like that. Just everything points to all the evidence that men should not be in women's sports. And the only reason it doesn't look like a problem at the moment is there's not very many of them, which is an argument people throw out constantly. Well, then the argument becomes, well, then how many is too many? But then they won't answer that because it's like, well, they're women anyway. Well, then why did you start with that there's not very many then? That makes you sound dishonest.
Or women's locker rooms, because that's all a matter of opinion. I'm only interested in presenting the facts, which includes any corrections in the video description, so check that out.
Well, presenting the facts as to what we seem to know, you know what I mean? But there's definitely a fair amount of issues here.
And then let you form your own opinion. Hey, perhaps that's something cable news could try.
That's the point of these like news shows. They do want to push certain opinions. They're like opinion shows. They're not like factual. And it becomes a problem that people listen to this and instantly believe everything they say. You should think for yourself, absolutely. The other thing is, like fucking left-wing people, left-wing news outlets could do this kind of shit too if they wanted, but they don't. Like for the most part, it's things like TYT and like Majority Report, but I don't know. That's just in the US. I don't know what the fuck we have over here. Like when I look for things like the what's her name? It's literally on my title, fuck's sake. When I look for things like the Dr. Upton thing, is it Dr. Sarah Upton? It's Dr. Beth Upton, isn't it? Fuck's sake. I'm so sorry. My title is incorrect. I don't know why I got the name wrong there. Anyway. But yeah, like all you can find is like right-wing outlets talking about it, really. It doesn't have to be this way. But yeah, I mean, that's what these people are going to do. They're going to form certain opinions. They're going to decide what they regard, what they disregard. That's just kind of how it is.
I mean, hey, perhaps that's something cable news could try. If you want to support this channel, I'd much rather you show your appreciation by donating to a charity I support, run by doctors that trades forest.
Yes, for example, the Mary Chew. Hey, check the links in my description. You can super chat via Streamlabs. You can buy some music if you want something in return for it, I guess. On Bandcamp, you can check my music out on Spotify. If you're on Twitch, I am monetized on Twitch. You can subscribe to me on there. You can also check out my Discord.
Protection for healthcare. It's resulted in the protection of vital rainforests and better health for poor people who live there. Your contributions have totaled more than $400,000 and helped this charity expand onto 3 continents. Wow.
I'm Dr. Kenneth Lacovera.
I did not. I hate autoplay. Like, they snuck that one in, didn't they? They really snuck that one in. I don't have to turn it off anymore. So annoying. Oh, it's right here. Retard moment. Anyway. Yeah, we've got GB News, we've got Talk TV. They're all like right-leaning. There isn't really that much of a good reason I can see as to why left-leaning media couldn't do that kind of thing, but they don't. I don't know how well it would go if they did. Like, in the US, it's very much a thing, but, you know. And that's stuff like TYT and stuff like that. It's not so much mainstream legacy like media. But hey, like, to be fair, Talk TV, GB News, are they legacy media? Not really. Anyway, we have this going on. It's always fun when people watch the video and then think I said the complete opposite of what I actually said. They are so convinced that they built an elaborate argument against it without realizing they're agreeing with me. Just for fun, to save me answering the dozens of people individually, here are some of the points of posts of people who score an F for listening comprehension. Look, here's a clue. If I didn't say it, it means I'm not saying it. Listen, that applies to me too. Those of you that watch my shit and then do the whole, oh, so you're saying this. Here's a hint for everyone. if you're going to do this, if you're going to sum up someone's fucking shit, if you're trying to sum up someone that way, think about whether I said anything of the sort before doing this. Because often you are bullshitting. So, first one. So you're hinting that because a small number of very rare cases we must turn society upside down. Never said that. Nope, he didn't. That's correct. So you're using an intersex argument to defend normally functioning men becoming women. He's not really saying that either. Someone tried to say the lab leak from Wuhan didn't happen. Maybe I wasn't listening. I didn't hear anything of the sort. So you're saying the concept of men wearing men's clothes, vice versa, is funny. Like, this guy gets some retards in his comments. Jesus Christ. I thought I was bad with, like, idiots like Sarah Bella showing up. By the way, that Sarah Bella person is back. Guess what? Sarah Bella, who has been, like, calling me a bootlicker fucking ad nauseum in my video about Amaya and pissed up lawyer. That's fucking Amaya's girlfriend. And, like, yesterday and the day before, Amaya's been all up in my fucking DMs on Twitter, asking to, like, be friends again, asking to be in my Discord and shit like that. And I'm like, your girlfriend, at the very same time that you are kissing my ass, is, like, running around calling me a bootlicker to anyone that will listen, having clearly not understood the fucking video I made, and not even being anywhere near part of it. But hey. What else we got? 33, 33, 33. Yeah. They get a lot of stupid argument. The thing is, he might be just picking all kinds of weird things. And, like, I never said intersex the third sex. Specifically said is not a third sex. I can see the presentation of it where it's like this, that, and that. I see what it means, you know what I mean? I got my own drama now. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Trans people are just fucking weird, you know what I mean? I just don't get it. I don't get it. I get weird polycules coming after me where one of them wants to fucking shove their dick up my ass, and then another one wants to fucking shove their boot in my mouth and ask me how it tastes. It's so strange. Although since I pointed out that that's what's going on, she seems to have shut the fuck up. So I don't know. I'll just continue making fun of her until she actually shows any kind of, you know, sign of taking back the shit that she is doing. Because that's actually called harassment. And I'm being a lot nicer about it than I should be, quite frankly. Yeah, all of this is dumb. I mean, the problem is, you talk about this kind of shit, that's what's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen. God, these... Thanks for letting me know you stopped learning science when you turned 11. And here's the thing, they'll never correct you, they just scold you. This is a massive hint that this person is a fucking loser who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. Listen, if someone gets something wrong in your opinion, then you should be able to show them how they went wrong. If all you're going to do is show up and be like, hey, you're wrong and you're a prick, like, that doesn't make any sense. Chat isn't visible. Did I hide chat? I can't even see chat. Oh, there it is. Let me just see if I can... See if that works. See if that works. I don't know. Yeah, despite being not interested in any of that kind of shit, I somehow still find myself in the middle of weird fucking trans relationships. Where one of them is in love with me somehow. Well, not in love with me, but like sucking me off. And the other one fucking hates me. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Anyway, there we go. Potholer54. There's parts I agree with. There's a lot I don't agree with. I don't know. I think whatever you do when you talk about this kind of shit, there's going to be people that come after you because people are losing their shit over this whole thing. And the problem is we've kind of pushed society too far in a certain direction. So that's kind of a lot of why it's become this kind of thing. So it's all very well complaining about people on politics shows, you know what I mean? It's not black on black, it's white. I don't know why it's not working, and if I can't fix it quickly, you might have to deal with it, unfortunately. Okay, Bacon, it kind of sounds like you're just as down with like the cancel culture bullshit as everyone else. People aren't going to get stuff right all the time. People are going to want to shoot for the middle and fail. It's not my job to like punish these people. It's not my job to sit here and call them a retard every time they get something that I consider wrong when I'm not a scientist by any measure. So I don't know. You want me to soy out or whatever the fuck? That's not going to happen right now. Especially not because I'm moving on. So there we go. Interesting. Not a lot I agree with, but hey, that's how it goes. That's how it goes. I'm just observing and commenting.